A couple of days ago, there was an incident at the Natanz fuel enrichment plant, which is widely speculated to have been caused by cyber. So, are we talking about the new Stuxnet version? What's going on here? Let's check this out. I think if you are in the cybersecurity community, you will already have heard about that in your social media and the news. I mean, if you just Google for Natanz cyber attack or even for Natanz attack, you will find a lot of news pieces which tell you in direct language that this was a cyber attack. Funny thing, they don't have any real evidence. Let's just look at a couple of news bites here. So especially The Guardian leaning out of the window heavily. Natanz sabotage highlights Iran's vulnerability to cyber attacks. Funny thing, if you read the article, it's actually mostly about Stuxnet because they don't have anything on this new attack. So they're just in very vague terms talking about cyber here, and then they divert to Stuxnet. Same thing with the Daily Beast. Iran blames Israel for explosive cyber attacks. So this is one hint. It has to do with an explosion. Apparently there was an explosion at Natanz. We'll talk about that in a minute. And again, no real facts here. Iran calls it nuclear terrorism. Well, that is just pure propaganda because it suggests that you could actually cause a nuclear chain reaction by messing with the centrifuges at Natanz, and that is total nonsense. That is physically impossible. Then we have Aram online. Cyber attack on Natanz. Tehran vows revenge. A few doubts about who carried out the attack. Okay, we are already jumping to the alleged perpetrator. No facts. Absolutely no facts, no pieces of evidence. Islamic Republic News Agency also tells us about the cyber attack on Natanz and what it allegedly was designed to do, or what its purpose is, designed to scuttle diplomacy. Yeah, no facts here, and it goes on and on and on. So let's try to break this down. First of all, there is no evidence that it actually was a cyber attack. What we understand is, first, there was an explosion. Second, it was about the power supply for Natanz. And this gives us something to work with. So this allows us to put it in perspective and check the validity of these claims and also figure out what might have been going on. So let's take it for granted that there was a disruption of power for Natanz and that it was caused by an explosion. What about this power supply thing, you might wonder? Well, it is associated with a known physical attack vector against the facility or against nuclear enrichment sites at large. And it has to do with the capability to safely run down the centrifuges. And then I'll get back to that in a second. But first of all, there is a precedent for this. So actually in 2012, in the summer of 2012, there was a physical attack involving explosions against the power supply for the countries, meaning Iran's two main uranium enrichment facilities, which at the time would have been Natanz and Fordo. And this article by David Sanger and Rick Gladstone particularly focuses on Fordo because Fordo is almost impossible to attack by bombing, short of a tactical nuclear weapon. So there is a precedent on the record, and that incident in 2012 was unsuccessful because it impacted the power lines that led to Fordo and Natanz, and that doesn't achieve much because these facilities do have their backup power supplies. So you can imagine that, especially at Natanz, because it's the much larger site compared to Fordo, they have their mini power plant on site. And now it gets interesting and gets related to this recent incident. Well, if you can bet that the Iranians are prepared for loss of power, which could be just accidental, or it could be because of malicious activity, as we have seen it in 2012. Now, for that purpose, for uninterrupted operation, and particularly in order to execute a safe contingency shutdown, they have their backup power supply, just like probably in your data center you have your uninterruptible power supplies. Only that at a facility like Natanz, it is much bigger. So we are talking about big ass UPSs, and we are also talking about backup diesel generators. I would assume that they have multiple diesel generators, probably 4, and you would also expect that at least one of those diesels is running constantly as a standby, and meaning it doesn't generate a real electrical load, but it doesn't need to be started in the event that the batteries run out of power. And only to find out, well, guess what? we cannot start up the diesel. And in order to prevent this, it is most likely running on standby at low RPM, etc. This, by the way, is standard procedure in facilities where you have a process where loss of electrical power would be disastrous, and then you just have your thing going. If you would find out that your diesels cannot be started, you would automatically execute a safety shutdown. So that is what I speculate here, but from just out of experience, how these facilities are designed. And why is, in the case of Natanz, why is this backup power, or why is loss of power a problem? And that relates to the safe process shutdown. So if you would lose power just like that, then the centrifuges would spin down, obviously. But the bigger problem is, if the centrifuges are still filled with gas, with UF6, they're almost guaranteed to break. Okay, and how do we know this? Well, this is actually common knowledge in the uranium enrichment business. So this is a paper by Urenco, and they stated explicitly loss of electrical power. When such an event happens, the machines will begin to run down, certainly. Their UF6 holdup, however, strongly depends on the angle, blah, 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 blah. And if the gas is not timely removed from a rundown machine, it will almost certainly crash if the gas is not timely removed, okay? In other words, this is a known attack vector. Which I speculate was intended back in 2012, but it doesn't achieve much if you don't kill the backup power, which is on site, okay? And in that case, so it will almost certainly crash, and this will not result in debris flying around, etc. It will not result in a nuclear catastrophe because you still have the casings. So that the safety of the personnel is not affected, nor is the environment, but it would mean a considerable loss of investment, many millions of euros or US dollars for just one cascade. And apparently that would have been the intent of the recent attack, or, just crash a couple of thousand centrifuges, which allegedly happened, okay? Congratulations, Mossad or whoever is behind that operation. So apparently that is the attack vector. And now you may wonder, well, didn't we see that already with Stuxnet? No, we did not. So if you have followed the Stuxnet story on our YouTube channel carefully, you will remember, yes, in the second version of Stuxnet, in the second campaign, they also ran the centrifuges down to almost a complete standstill. So you would have expected to crash, for the centrifuges to crash, but you are missing one important point. In the second Stuxnet attack, in the second campaign, the attack only affected the centrifuge drive system, but not the cascade protection system, which means in this event, if there was, if vibration was detected, and there almost certain, definitely there was vibration that had to do with the critical frequencies, yada, yada, yada. And then the cascade protection system, which was fully functional, not affected by this, by the attack, the first attack code was inoperative at this time, it would have kicked in and would have automatically evacuated the gas from the cascades. And that means that the cascades would not have been destroyed by this this bigger problem, which is simply a shock wave. Okay, a shock wave going back and forth in the cascade, blowing up the rotor. So, I mean, how cool is that, right? Certainly one of the most interesting attack vectors if your goal is to physically destroy as many centrifuges at Natanz as possible in one blow, which I have told you in my work on Stuxnet was not the goal of Stuxnet. And if you missed that part, just go back to the Stuxnet story. It was not the objective. In this attack, apparently it was the objective, and apparently the attacker succeeded. Yes. So getting back to the attack, what I speculate was happening, and by the way, this is maybe the only news bite that touches on this aspect was by Kim Zetter in The Intercept, where she is relying on Albright. Albright, wait a second, where is the... Was it a cyber attack? No, it was not. I'll get back to that in a second. David Albright. Albright, come on, where are you, Albright? Albright says, blah, blah, blah. Yes. So, Mr. Albright, working for... Where is this guy? Come on. Albright. Well, you got to give it to David Albright. Sorry, David. Founder and president of the Institute for Science and International Security in Washington, D.C. So you got to give credit to Kim, because she actually invested the effort to talk to a nuclear scientist familiar with the centrifuges. Albright has personal experience at Natanz. He was there back in his days working for the IAEA. The one thing that I believe Albright got wrong is, and this is also then a thread in this article by Kim, he speculates that it was probably about the critical frequencies, that I have also highlighted for the second Stuxnet attack. I think the point that Albright misses is that in this situation and in the recent attack, the cascades would not have been evacuated. So all the UF6 was in there, and then you get the problem with the shock waves and you know, just ripping the rotors apart. Okay, so I think that's missing here. Now, that brings us to the question, could this have been accomplished by a cyber attack? In theory, yes. So is it possible to mess up an uninterruptible power supply? Is it possible to mess up diesel generators? Yes, it is. It is well known because it was actually it was exercised in the Ukraine attack. Okay, I mean, if you don't remember this, go back to my video, Ukraine Revisited, where I talk you through that once more. And so the simple background is modern uninterruptible power systems, and certainly also diesel generators, they are connected to the network, because it's so much more convenient if you can just activate them, deactivate them via the network. And that opens up an attack vector, obviously, and this was exploited in Ukraine. Now, I would say if it actually was executed by cyber in Natanz this time, then, I mean, Iranians, you must be absolute morons beyond any any hope for rehabilitation or help. So this is so outlandish, this idea, that the personnel at Natanz would not have protected against this vector, that I think this is just, it's not credible. It doesn't make any sense. You have to put it in perspective. So these folks, the good people at Natanz, they have their air defense missiles around them, because they know, you know, these Zionists, they are after us. They try to blow up our facility. They have been attacked perpetually back in 2008, 2009, 2010 with Stuxnet. They had this other attack against the power supply back in 2012 that I mentioned at the beginning of the video, and they have also learned about what happened in Ukraine, and you want to tell me they were so dumb that they didn't prepare against a cyber attack that would hit their power supply? I think that is not credible. I don't take this into account. And especially if you also consider that what we know, so this is reported multiple times, for example, by the Jerusalem Post, there was an explosion in that power supply center, in that local power distribution center on site. There was an explosion. Now, that brings us to the other consideration. How would you be able to actually execute an explosion by cyber targeting these power supply systems? Well, I don't know. I got to tell you, I don't see any technical vector how you could accomplish that. So I think this is extremely unlikely. And then also, fortunately, our guys at the J Post, they tell us that allegedly the explosion, blah, 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 caused severe damage to the site, blah, blah, blah. And allegedly there was, that was not caused by cyber, but by what I would call a decent pack of C4, so just blowing up explosives. Apparently they would have been placed there on site, on location by an insider, which also allegedly Iran already has identified, arrested. I would expect that the poor fellow is presently tortured if he is still alive. So this, in my opinion, is the most credible scenario here. Nothing to do with cyber. This is the most credible explanation that I see. Pack of explosives, blow up the power supply system, and then most likely you have a good chance to destroy a couple of thousand centrifuges, as it is alleged in some reports. And you don't need any cyber for that. Or in other words, I don't see how it would credibly could have been achieved by a cyber attack. Now, and this gets us back to the big picture as far as cyber is concerned. The media knows pretty much nothing about this. And they don't even bother to do any reporting on this. I mean, kudos to Kim Zetter, who even at least invested the effort to talk with David Albright, and I think also Oli Heinonen. Hi Oli, if you view this, I mean, good work in there. I mentioned this because I had this very same discussion. I would imagine the very same, because I wasn't present when Kim interviewed him. I had this very same discussion with Oli back in 2016 when we were trying to make sense out of the Stuxnet attack, and we were also discussing potential additional attack vectors, and this brought us to the 2012 attack, which didn't involve cyber. Okay, so they know nothing, the media at large, without Kim. They have no desire to do any real reporting. They just placate it as cyber and try to scare you. Why do they do that? Well, because they're interested in the clicks and just the notion that there was most likely a new cyber attack against Natanz, because everybody knows, I mean, Natanz, Stuxnet, so everything that happens at Natanz must have a cyber background. That is totally non-intelligent. But unfortunately, this is how it works today. But I would say the even bigger problem will be, in my opinion, my prediction is you will see this incident for the next couple of years in most vendor pitches, most OT security vendor pitches. Will educate you. You know what happened at Natanz? First they got attacked by Stuxnet, and then in 2021 again by this other, even more powerful attack, more aggressive. You know, just caused an explosion, and then several thousand centrifuges exploded, and it was described as nuclear terrorism by Iran. Imagine what could happen here in the US or in Europe, etc. Yada yada yada. So that is, I would say, the worst outflow of this recent attack, the worst impact that it's going to have. Again, first of all, congratulations whoever was behind that attack. Good job. Unfortunately, one of the operatives apparently was identified and caught, and we should probably not expect to see this fellow again. It's become so bizarre, the reporting on cyber attacks, especially when it's cyber physical, when it's related to OT. It's pure sensationalism. They don't know anything, and they don't have even the slightest desire to figure out what really happened. So that's the sorry state of affairs that I'm going to leave you with for today.